So in this demo, we're going to start getting into prototype mode, which is where we're going to add our interaction and have our animation come to life. So we've been in design mode. We've been making our artboards. We've been changing properties of our elements to make sure that we got our keyframes in. And so I'm going to go over what prototype does and different functions in it. We'll kind of do a simple one with the kiwi here, and then I'm going to walk you through how I did the first section of the Facey Bookie animation that I demoed for you. So first off, let's take a look at how the app kind of changes when you change which mode you're in. So for right now, take a look on the right-hand side where our properties are. And notice how when I change to prototype, the options have changed. Now we've got our interaction, what type of interaction it is, what's going to trigger the start of that, what is going to happen, how basically we're going to get from point A to point B. And in here, when we have many different artboards, as we do say here, I can tell it exactly which artboard I want to go to. And there'll be other options where we won't necessarily just go to an artboard. We'll show those in some of the other examples. The other thing is taking a look on the right. On the left, you'll notice that our tools have changed quite dramatically. Basically, the only thing we can do in here is select things, and we can zoom in and out. So, assuming that we have two artboards, and in those two artboards, we have the same element, but properties have changed. Prototype is going to be how we're going to get from one artboard to the next. Now we're going to start off very simply, and as we get further into the application, we become more comfortable with it, we'll change up how we're going to go ahead and make those interactions. But right now we're going to start off where we're going to assume that we'll tap on our little bird, and when we tap on it, we want the kiwi to be happy. So I've gone from design mode to prototype mode, and I'm going to click on my bird. Now you notice that when I click on elements inside prototype, they'll turn blue and have this little arrow. That's telling me that I'm going to be assigning an interaction to whatever's inside the box. In this case, I want to click on the actual bird so that I can then pull this guy out. But no, you could have that whole page be clickable just by clicking on the background. I'm going to do that in the Facebooky demo, but for right now, I want to click on the bird. And so when I click on the bird, I would like it to change. I want it to be happy and change color. So I'm going to grab this, and what I'm saying is when I interact with it, I would like it to go here. So I'm saying when I click on the bird, I want it to transition to the second artboard. I could have it where you click on the page and transition to the second artboard. So remember, whatever has that blue bounding box, that's what you're clicking on. Now I'm saying clicking. That's because my trigger right here is a tap. Now, notice that this isn't only relegated to being a computer. There are options for things like keys and gamepad. So if you wanted, people will use this to prototype out interactive games for different systems like PlayStation and Xbox. You can have voice commands. Now, that's not something we're going to get into in this course, but that's certainly something that if you're interested in accessibility, it's really kind of great that you can now build in voice commands into your interactions. And I do encourage you, if that is something you're interested in, there is information on that in LinkedIn Learning. Dragging is also something that may come in handy. We're going to get into some of the different kinds of like stacking and grouping that we can do later on. And so this may be useful to you. But for right now, we're going to stick with just tapping on things. It's kind of the easiest, most basic way to move our animation forward. Now, we then need to say what's going to happen when I tap on it. By default, it's going to go to a transition where it basically dissolves from artboard 1 to artboard 2. But that's not what we want. That is your kind of default if you are, say, moving through a website and you wanted to go from the first page to the second page and you just wanted to have a nice little quick dissolve in between them so we could see, we're not just kind of jump cutting between one thing and the next. But what we have is we actually have the same object on both pages, and we change some properties. So instead of transition, we can go to this great option called Auto Animate. And auto animate works whenever you have the same objects on more than one artboard and you have changed properties between the two artboards. And so it will automatically see those as two keyframes and it will animate or tween in between both of the keyframes. We'll get to what some of the other options are later on when we get more into our interactions. So for right now, we're mainly going to use this transition and auto animate is what we're going to look for here. So what's going to happen, and you'll notice that the options change. So in auto animate, what we're saying is that we're going to go from here, from start, to this artboard, position 2, and you'll notice that if we had other artboards, I could choose. We'll see that when we get into the Facey Bookie demo. Now, how do we want this to happen and how long? This is where we're going to get to control some things around time and around whether things move kind of linearly or if they kind of have this more natural easing. So when you animate things, the default, if you're in an animation program, like something like Adobe After Effects, is going to be for things to move linearly. But I don't know if you've noticed, but not many things move in a nice, even line from start to finish. If you say are walking or running, you start off a little slower, then you get up to full speed, and then you slow down. That would be called easing in and easing out. You can also just add an ease on one direction or the other. Snap is going to be where it will very quickly snap into place. You've got wind up and you've got bounce, which literally bounces things. So depending on what you're wanting to animate, some of these may be more or less useful. If you want to show something dropping and you want it to bounce and you don't want to animate that bounce yourself, you can go right ahead and add a bounce. Most things will look most natural with ease in and out. But we can go ahead and try them and see which ones we like. The duration is by default 0.3 seconds. That's not very long. In fact, you won't really be able to kind of watch or notice the animation. Half a second, 0.5 seconds, that is probably a good starting point, and then you can see if that feels too long or too short. When I went through my Facey Bookie demo, there are certain interactions where I have longer because I want you to really see the change happening. And for other ones, they're very short because I want them to almost be invisible. So let's start with 0.5 seconds, and then we're going to see what happens. We're going to kind of demo it out and see if we like it. Now, when I go to see this, one thing to note is that it's always going to start with whichever artboard you have selected. So I want to make sure that I have my start artboard selected. Now, up here, I have some options. I have sharing. I can invite someone to the document. I have this guy, which is a device preview. This only works with devices that are connected via USB and that have the Adobe XD app installed. You're not going to really use this, but if you ever did want to prototype something on an iPad or an iPhone or an Android phone or an Android tablet, just know it needs to be physically plugged into your computer and have the Adobe XD app running. What we're going to use is this guy here, which is the desktop preview. And you'll see in the Facey Bookie demo that I'll be able to do it even when I'm demoing things that are for a mobile device rather than a web screen. So I'm just going to go ahead and click that play button. Now you'll notice that the background here, I made it so that that wasn't what I click on. What I click on is the actual bird. And whenever I am over the kind of big square area of the bird, I can click. So I'm going to go ahead and click now. And did we see how the eye kind of like did that little... I'm just going to shut it. Now, if I wanted it to be clickable to go back, by the way, I just have to click on here. I'm going to go back here. And I want to make sure that tapping, I auto-animate back to the start. And thankfully, it's kept my easing in and out and 5 seconds the same, or 0.5 seconds the same. I'm going to go ahead and change that to none so that you can see what happens when it goes each way. So start, play. And we can see that the change in the eye is much smoother than the change in the color. It kind of snaps between the colors, but the eye has this nice transition. So you can play with how these things change and how you want them to transition between the two things. I'm going to break the video into two, and then we're going to get into, in the next half of the video, I'm going to walk you through the changes I did to the first section of the Facey-Bookie demo, so that you can see how I use both the auto animate but also the transition as a way to get through that first section of the demo.